Hello and welcome to Cicerone Live. Thank you so much for joining us for our December live event with Alan Hinkes, where we'll be exploring his mountaineering career as documented in his book, 8,000 Meters Climbing the World's Highest Mountains. I'm Amy Hodkin from Cicerone Press, and it's lovely to be here tonight, wherever you are. And yeah, I'll speak to Alan for about 40 minutes and then we'll move on to questions from you, the audience. So there's plenty of time to think of those and send them to us. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can write those in the comments. And if you're watching on the Cicerone website, it might be easiest to email live@cicerone.co.uk or tweet to us at Cicerone Press. My colleague Hannah is managing all of the behind the scenes stuff. We'll collect your questions. So wherever you choose to put them, we'll try and get through as many as we possibly can. If you're inspired by what you hear tonight and want a copy of Alan's book for yourself, or perhaps as a Christmas present for someone, we are offering a 25% discount on his book, 8,000 Meters, to our audience through purchases on the Cicerone website. So that's www.cicerone.co.uk. The discount code is Everest25, and you can use that at the checkout on the Cicerone website to get 25% off the book. Now we're having a few technical issues, so I'm going to show some photos shortly, but you'll see those brilliant photos very soon. And yeah, those are straight from the book, and each chapter of the book explores Alan's experiences of these 14 8,000 meter peaks, as well as some insights into high altitude mountaineering. So it's a really lovely coffee table book, and it documents Alan's fascinating journey. If you need to dip out at any point, or you know someone who couldn't make it tonight and you think they'd really enjoy this, the event will be available afterwards on the Cicerone website and on our YouTube and Facebook. So yeah, you can find it afterwards, and highlights will also be put into an episode of our newly launched podcast, Footnotes, the Cicerone podcast, which you can find on all major podcast apps and on the Cicerone website. So we hope you enjoy that as well. I'm going to do an introduction for Alan now, for people who don't already know or would like a reminder. So Alan Hinkes is an accomplished cameraman and documentary maker, photographer, motivational speaker, environmentalist, and mountain guide. He is the first Briton to climb all 14 of the world's 8,000 meter mountains, part of an exclusive club of very few people who have achieved that feat. He began his mountaineering career while at Northallerton Grammar School in North Yorkshire. He progressed to the Alps with ascents on many difficult mountains, including the notorious north face of the Eiger, and eventually graduated to Himalayan mountaineering. He completed his final 8,000 meter peak in 2005 with a successful ascent of Kanchenjunga. Alan was awarded an OBE in 2006 in the New Year's Honours List and is an honorary citizen of his hometown, Northallerton. He has received many other accolades, including Yorkshireman of the Year 2005, the Outstanding Achievement Award from the Royal Institute of Navigation, and the President's Award for Outstanding Voluntary Contribution to Water Aid. He is involved in various charitable works, including for Water Aid, the Cystic Fibrosis Trust, the Duke of Edinburgh Award, and Mountain Rescue. He works closely with the British Mountaineering Council as well. Alan lives in North Yorkshire and enjoys being in the hills, rock climbing and fell walking, and you will regularly see him in the Lake District and in Yorkshire tramping the fells and moors or clinging to a rock face. Now, thankfully, he's not clinging to a rock face tonight, although we are currently dealing with some technical issues with Alan's sound. So I'm going to play some, show you some of the photos now, and then we're going to get Alan sorted and with us very shortly. So I hope you enjoy seeing these photos, and we'll put up some information about the discount and all sorts of other things. So yeah, hope you enjoy that, and we'll be back very soon. And remember to send your questions to us wherever you're watching. Thank you very much. Now, I believe we should have Alan Hinkes. There we go.
Howdy.
I just want to apologise to everyone for that delay, and yeah, for the fact that there wasn't any sound on the photos. That was intentional, so I'm sorry about that.
Right.
Yeah, so we've so you didn't miss Alan doing a presentation there or anything, don't worry. So Alan, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad that we could get those technical issues sorted, and I think you'll have missed it, but I did do an introduction for you so everyone knows exactly who you are, and yeah, all of your amazing mountaineering achievements. So I wanted to ask you kind of to start at the beginning, and from all of your mountaineering achievements, you clearly love climbing and mountaineering so much and feel a real drive to do it. But what made you start climbing in the first place?
Well, I'm asked that a lot. The answer might be in my book if you buy it. But what made me do it in the first? Just something that's in me is what I usually say. Some people like tennis, some like footy, guess some like fishing. And it was just climbing for me. Well, hill walking and mountaineering. I was just drawn to the hills. I always was as a little lad. I always wanted to go into the hills. On family drives out into the countryside, I would see people in the hills. Anyway, the first chance I got was when I was at school at Northallerton Grammar School, and teachers took me out, and it was just for me. I wasn't put off by the inclement weather. I just loved it. I think I like suffering. I must do. Yeah. Well, we're all suffering at the moment, but that's another story, isn't it? There you go.
Yeah, and I might ask you actually at the end how you're dealing with COVID and lockdown and everything, and how that's
What's
been.
COVID? What's lockdown? Don't know anything about it. Don't know what you're talking about.
Reading your book, it does feel like a natural progression to go from, climbing at grammar school to then being in the Lake District to Scotland in winter, and then Alpine North Faces, and then eventually to the Himalayas. Was it just a case of testing that next limit each time?
Yeah, I suppose maybe because I'm a bit older, I don't know. I served in a traditional apprenticeship, as they say, starting in Briton, hill walking, but encompassing the whole of mountaineering. And I remember going in the library at the Grammar School and getting a book called Mountaineering by Alan Blackshaw. And it started with how to walk, how you walk, how you place your feet. And I'll never forget that, because even as a young lad in my teens, I remember thinking, all how to walk. But I thought, and that book progresses. It was nicknamed the Bible. That book progresses right through to Himalayan stuff. So mountaineering encompasses everything, from rambling, which is the Ramblers, right through to hardcore mountaineering. And it's interesting, if anyone can get that book, there is an art to walking. If you're going on long walks, you do want to conserve your energy and walk in an energy efficient way. Obviously, if you want to burn out, you go on a fell run, or even on your walk, you could walk on your tiptoes and burn yourself out. But you should look forward and place your feet. Now, I have to admit, I can look at myself now, and it's solitary that sometimes other people have looked at me and said I seem to know what I'm doing, even walking. But even walking, I am aware now, as an experienced mountaineer and walker, that I can walk far more efficiently than other people. And I very rarely, or I try not to walk on paths. I'll go off the path, and I can walk just as quickly off the path. I'm still in my comfort zone. But ordinary people, it's actually compensating that, but ordinary people are out of the comfort zone, off a path in the Lake District. Get them off the path, and they can't walk. Comfort zone, it's all a bit knobbly. I can walk just as fast off the path, and it's softer for me and better for my knees and things like that. And actually, Blackshaw's Mountaineering said you don't need a stick. And everybody uses, well, not everybody, a lot of people use sticks nowadays. They're called trekking poles or walking poles. You don't need them, not unless there's something really wrong with you. I shouldn't say that. The trekking pole manufacturers won't like me for that. I used to use them, and I do use them when I'm now and again and for prodding through crevasses, through bridges in crevasses. And I do use them now and again for going downhill. And as you get older, they do help your knees and your hips a bit. Generally, when you're younger, you should develop your core strength and your balance. You shouldn't be going around in your teens, or if there's nothing wrong with you, with trekking poles.
I did think it was interesting in your book that you talk about how you find that you were much quicker on descents than a lot of other people. Yeah, I just thought that was really interesting that you were overtaking people and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, the 8,000 meters are a major challenge, and you say in your preface that you didn't initially set out to climb them all, but you wanted to climb some of the world's most challenging mountains. But when did climbing all 14 become something that you wanted to do?
I guess when I'd got 8 of them done, I think, again, I might say it in my book. I haven't read my book for yonks, actually, but when I got 8 of them done, I realised I was more than halfway. There was only 6 left. And at that point, there was still only about 5 people, maybe 6 people on the planet that had done all 14. So I thought, well, that's quite a good challenge, I might as well. And I'd done the highest, Everest, and I'd done the hardest, K2. Turned out that none of them are easy, and Kanchenjunga, which was my last. The third highest is just as difficult, if not more difficult, than K2. Anyway, I'd got 8 done. That's when I decided to do them all. And I thought I might be in the top 10. As it happens, I was the 13th, but one person had already been killed, so I was 12th when I did it. Or there was only 12 of us, should I say, when I did it. It's the same number of people that stood on the moon, which is what sort of bandied about. But there's a couple of dozen or more maybe done it now. I've never kept track. Maybe 30 people done all 14 now.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned K2 there, and you first saw that from Broad Peak, and then attempted it 3 times before your successful summit in 1995. What is it, or what was it about K2 that just fascinated you so much and drew you back each time?
Yeah, well, I suppose as a mountaineer, and a climber, I sort of aspired to things like the North Face of the Eiger when I was a young lad, and I eventually did that. And that's a fabulous mountain to look at, is the Eiger, and the North Face is a challenge. So I'd heard about K2 and that it was so gnarly and dangerous, and not many people had climbed it. It's much more worthy than Everest. It's not much lower than Everest. I think K2 still only had about 300 ascents, maybe 90 deaths, whereas Everest has probably had, I don't know, it's probably getting on for 1,000 ascents, Everest, maybe getting on that way, and it's maybe had a couple of hundred deaths. But anyway, yeah, sure enough, when I saw K2, it just impresses, just like the North Face the Eiger does, just like the Matterhorn does above Zermatt, just like Rosebery Topping does, just like Stack Polly in northern Scotland does, just like Dufton Pike does. That's quite impressive. It really is impressive, is K2. And you just look at it and think, as a mountaineer, I've got to climb that. And I just bit of cognitive dissonance without me realizing it. When I was younger and I first saw it, I just thought I want to climb it. Didn't sort of think much about the danger or death or whatever would happen to me. And then, I donated 3 years of my life to that mountain. I had 3 consecutive attempts on it over 3 years and finally did it. In the year I did it, there was only 5 of us that climbed it. I got to the top alone. My climbing partners dropped out solo to the top, but I got to the top on the same day. It's 2 Pakistanis and two Dutch people, Dutch climbers. So 5 of the summit didn't survive, but 8 that were killed that year, 1995. Yeah. So it really is the savage mountain, K2. Dark, huge. The south face on the Pakistan side is 12,000 foot in old money. That's, 4,000 meters. And on the other Chinese side is just a steep. Really is an imposing stark mountain without a name. The K stands for Karakoram, and the 2 sits second from the left, not because it's the second highest. That's just a coincidence.
Oh.
Got the designation K2. It hasn't got a name.
Gosh, that's fascinating, isn't it? And I mean, if you hadn't climbed K2 and Everest early on in your 8,000 meters, do you think you would have gone on to do the rest?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I got headhunted to climb Everest after K2 because I was making documentaries, and I made about 13 docos actually, and I filmed on the top of K2. So I guess if I could film on the highest mountain in the world, I could film on Everest. So I got headhunted to film on an attempt by Brian Blessed on Everest, and did a lot of filming on the film that's called Summit Fever. I have to say, I wasn't particularly fazed by Everest. I thought, well, if I've done K2, I can do Everest. It was a bit like, if you've done the North Face, the Eiger, there's various other things you can do in the Alps, So I wasn't particularly out of my comfort zone on Everest, believe it or not. I know that sounds a bit much, but it shouldn't be underestimated and denigrated. People say, oh, every man and his dog can climb it now, and you pay your money and you try and climb it. Well, that's not true. You've got 60 or 100,000 pounds, you want to go and have a go at Everest, go and have a go and see if you can get up it. Yes, you might. Yes, you see queues of 200 people there, but that's just on one day. The next day, there might only be 20, and the day after that, there might be 2, and the day after that, none. So it still is a difficult, dangerous mountain. Most people who go there don't climb it, or killed, or they get frostbite and bits dropped off. It's important to keep your bits. I always tell people, by the way, I've got 10 fingers, look, 10 toes. And I always say to people, some will have heard this before, that means I've got 21 sticky out bits. 10 fingers and 10 toes make 21 sticky out bits, which is very important to keep all your sticky out bits and not get frostbite. No mountain's worth a digit. But I also say no mountain's worth a life. Coming back's a success, and the summit is only a bonus.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that later, actually. But I mean, do you think you were just lucky?
But there is a certain amount of luck, but I definitely think, I was always prepared to back off and have more than one go to a mountain. No mountain's worth a life coming back to success. It's only dangerous, but I definitely pushed the envelope a lot. You've only got to read the 14 chapters about the 14 mountains, in the book, and I definitely had quite a few close shaves. So you do need a bit of luck for sure. I'll say that, but you can make your own luck, and I was always prepared to back off and wait till I felt the weather was right, the conditions were right, and I felt right. Whereas a lot of people now, they'll get the weather forecast, sent into them on the satellite phones and the satellite faxes or the satellite internet now, and they'll just follow that without thinking about what the conditions are like. Not just the weather, the conditions. Is it going to avalanche? Is there going to be rockfall? Or what they feel like? You've got to have a seventh sense. So there was a lot of that. But yeah, I can't deny there's always luck in everything in life, isn't there? You'd be driving along, minding your own business, and an article crash into you, you're unlucky, So you've always got to have a bit of luck, yeah.
And I suppose talking about conditions, and it'd be great to talk about the realities of an expedition now, which you explore in your book for each of these different expeditions you did for each mountain. And I suppose each expedition will have its own particular challenges, but was there one thing that you always found most difficult, or that you always were very conscious of being aware of?
Well, I guess avalanches on these big mountains and the weather, getting stuck out on them. I did try and solo a couple of them. I did solo climb, without one of them, particularly Kashagrum 2, I did totally alone, and I was going to do some of the others, but that's a bit gnarly solo climbing, so you can fall through bridges and crevasses, and if you go 50 meters, you're going to be dead, yeah, you've always got to be aware. I guess going up and down the mountain, acclimatizing, because you arrive at base camp and then it takes you a month to acclimatize, going higher and higher on the mountain, back to base camp, rest. And every time you go up the mountain, you're generally exposed to avalanche, which is a bit like being exposed to shell fire or mortar fire in combat, and it does wear you down eventually. Yeah, so you've got to try and keep your spirits up and be resilient and all that. People can't
and
do.
How did you do that? How did you keep your spirits up? What sort of things did you think about to stay motivated?
I guess it's something that's in me. It's where I wanted to be. Towards the end on my last few 8,000ers, which was a century earlier on, and I had 3 or 4 left. And I remember I was acutely aware that I could get killed by then, so there was definitely cognitive dissonance there, which I mentioned in my book. And some of my friends would, be flippant and say, "Isn't it getting ashore, Alan? Don't you get worried about going on these expeditions? Don't you realise most people get killed? And most people that try and do all 14, again, this sounds like I'm bull-pooing it up. Most people that try and do all 14 don't do it. The reason they don't do it is because they get killed, or they stop with 10 or 11 and live happily or possibly unhappily ever after. So I was acutely aware I could get killed, but it was where I wanted to be. I'd get to the base camp on my 12th, which was Annapurna, which is only, when I got there, it only had 100 ascents Annapurna and 60 deaths. I thought that meant I had a chance of getting the chop. Apparently, some statistician says that isn't how you work statistics out. But anyway, it's a stark statistic that it had 100 ascents and 60 deaths. So I made it 101 ascents, where it was maybe roughly 100 ascents. It wasn't 60 deaths. And then my 13th was Dalagiri, and I did that on my first attempt, and then my last was Kanch, and I'd been to Kanch a couple of times before. But even when I got on all of those last 3 and I got to base camp, I didn't think, it's gone, I might get killed. In a hassle, I just really want to get this last one done. No, it's where I wanted to be. Even on Kanchenjunga on my 14th, final 8,000, which was my 27th attempt on all of them, it was where I wanted to be. I was happy and in my comfort zone to a certain extent. But as soon as I'd finished my last 8,000 at Kanch, I got on the satellite phone, told Fiona, my daughter, I'm safe, rang up a couple of sponsors and a friend in Kathmandu who helped me by getting a heli to get me out I had to go down to a lower altitude for the helicopter and then back to Kathmandu. And that was it. I felt free. I didn't have to go back to an 8,000er again, although I have. I've been back to Everest since the guide. So no, I was always happy being there. Even though I was in the back of my mind in a little box there, I knew there was chance I could get the chop.
And
Weird, that, isn't it?
and
And
how
I
do
accepted
those?
a lot of risk. I was aware of that. I should say certainly on Dalagiri, my 13th, I was acutely aware that I'd accepted what I thought was a 10% chance of getting killed. There was a very avalanche-prone slope, windslab slope near the summit. Again, I mentioned it in my book, and I stopped and I thought, well, this is my 13th 8,000. I stopped with my mate Passang. Said to Passang, I don't think we can go on, mate. This is like a 50% chance. I think this slope's going to avalanche. We're up 4,000 meters to our death slab. And then I thought, well, if I go all the way down, I could get killed descending. Dangerous. And then I'll have to come all the way back up to this point in weeks' time when I think the avalanche potential might have settled down a bit. I could get killed going up to that point through rockfall or anything. So I thought, you know what, maybe you should just push a bit harder. So cutting a long story short, I dug a little pit in the slope, assessed the avalanche potential, and I thought there was a 10% chance it would slide. And I said to Passang, come on, we're going to have to go on. He just, what I said, he didn't seem to, well, he didn't seem to mind. He took my judgment. And we went on to the summit, and then we had to cross. And I did a little piece of camera for the documentary, filming that. And I remember filming myself and looking back at the slope. And even on the documentary turn out, and I'd say I'm crapping myself. So I'm going across this slope there. I think I'll have a 10% chance of the slide. And then I had to cross that slope again, going back after passing a dead body. And I got to base camp and I was completely wiped out. And it took me a while to realise why I was wiped out, because I'd accepted, not happily, but I was prepared to accept a 10% chance of getting killed to climb my 13th 8,000, which is a bit of luck. And there's no way you'd get on a train at Penrith to go to Euston or Darlington to go to King's Cross if they said there's a 10% chance it's going to crash. You wouldn't get on an aeroplane to go rock climbing in Spain or to go on holiday if they said, yeah, hop on, 10% chance it'll crash. No one. And yet that's what I accepted. I mean, I didn't know it was 10%, could have been 50%, could have been 1%. I'd assessed it as 10% and accepted that. I don't think I'll ever really do that.
And I suppose making those judgment calls comes from, I suppose, years of experience. And there were many occasions where you did turn back and not go for the summit. And like summit fever is such a thing, isn't it? And
yeah,
how did you talk yourself out of that?
I wouldn't say it was summit fever I had, but I did push the envelope more. If I was prepared to accept a 10% chance of getting killed on the 13th 8,000, I probably wouldn't have done that earlier in my career. So I wouldn't call it summit fever, but for some reason I thought, oh, come on, go. But it is madness if you think of it, to accept a 10% chance of getting killed. But that's what people do sometimes in life. The only analogies you can make are in combat. People accept, often they're ordered, so they have to accept a 10% chance or more of getting killed in combat. But, those are the sort of analogies you can make, maybe. But, in normal life, you should never have to accept a 10% chance of getting killed. I mean, even driving along the most dangerous road in your car shouldn't be a 10% chance of getting killed. And certainly on any public transport, it shouldn't be. Maybe going into Middlesbrough on a Saturday night, that could be 10%. Sorry, Middlesbrough, I love you really, and you are in Yorkshire. That's a joke.
So I suppose when you completed your final peak, and you, sorry, that was on Annapurna, you said you felt completely wiped out, wasn't it? But how did you feel afterwards, after you completed all 14 8,000ers?
Oh, well, just free to do anything I wanted, get back into rock climbing in the Lake District in Cumbria or North Yorkshire or Scotland or Wales or anywhere, or go to Spain rock climbing or Greece, when it's sunny and wet in Britain. Just free to do anything I want, enjoy my daughter and my grandkids and just get on with my life and, try and live happily ever after, shall we say, just enjoying the hills and things, which I'm sort of trying to do.
When you reflect back on your journey, this 18-year journey, like what do you wish you'd known at the beginning? Is there anything?
Been asked that one, which I'd known at the beginning. Blimey, I can't answer that. I don't know. I mean, things were so different. There wasn't really satellite phones at the beginning to keep in touch. I used to write letters, have a mail runner to send the letter out. People would write me letters back. The first time I had a satellite phone, it was an Inmarsat, and it was the size of a kitchen unit with a big satellite dish, and it was called Inmarsat because they were made for battleships, initially made for the military or, oil rigs or whatever. And in fact, a local newspaper rang me up. They were very expensive to use, and I was on a French expedition, and we had this big satellite system with a technician to set it up. So it was like a kitchen unit with a huge umbrella satellite dish, an umbrella, but that sort of thing. And I said I gave this guy the number in the local paper to ring me up, saying it'll be like 20 quid a minute, mate, but you ring me up and I'll give you reports. Anyway, he told me afterwards that one time he rang up, he got like an Indian sounding voice when he said, "Can I speak to Alan Hinkes at, I think it's Choyu base camp, way in Tibet anyway, base camp." And this sort of Indian type voice, which he thought was maybe one of the Nepalese staff. Said, "Oh, Mr. Alan Hinkes, I don't know, sir. Don't think I know him, sir." "Well, no, he's on your expedition. This is, base camp there." And he said, "Wait a minute, sir, I'll go and get someone." Anyway, got this guy, and his voice comes. "Yes, can I help you, sir?" Quite a poshish voice, he said. "Can I speak to Alan Hinkes, at Bangma base camp?" This voice said, "Oh, sir, you have the wrong number. I'm a captain on an Indian battleship in the Indian Ocean." And he probably might have been waiting. It probably cost him 200 quid, So that was quite funny. But then I also got through to my gran. She was the first time I used her on these was 1990, 91. So my gran had been 90, 91. She was born in 1900, lived till she was 100, died in 2000. So my gran hadn't had a telephone long in her house, to be honest. I think she got the telephone in her 80s, telephone of her own. And in those days, we didn't have satellite phones. So we had the satellite phone in base camp, but not a lightweight one on the mountain. We had walkie-talkies on the mountain. Or believe it or not, as the French say, when you climb them, talkie-walkies, not walkie-talkies. So we had the talkie-walkie, but the technician at base camp could link that into the satellite phone. How easy is it now with a sat phone on a mountain? And but talkie-walkie, you have to say over after everything. So it's not two-way like a telephone. So I said to me, "Gran, I'm on the mountain, Gran. I'm at 6,500, 7,000 meters, right high the mountain. And I'm on a radio linked in. I'm on a walkie-talkie linked in to the telephone. So you'll have to keep saying over. Do you understand what I mean, Gran? Over." And she went, "Blow me. Over." I'll never forget that. 90-odd-year-old woman soon got on a walkie-talkie through a telephone for the first time. Anyway, you just have lightweight mobile phones the size of any phone now, lightweight satellite phones. So that's the difference. So anyway, that was a long-winded answer. Sorry about that. But I don't know what I'd do. No. Really. I don't know what I'd do.
No, that's fascinating. I mean, yeah. You mentioned your gran there, and you dedicate the book to her and also to your daughter, Fiona. And she was always your kind of summit flag. Was a photo of her. What does Fiona think of your mountaineering career? And what was that like for her?
Well, I suppose as she got older into her teens, I have a little video clip of her on Yorkshire telly when she was interviewed once. And as she got older, I do realise she got more worried and scared that I could die. I mean, in most of her life, she was, as a young girl, I was away a lot, but then I spent a lot of time with her when I got back, more than most people probably, and took her away and things. But she obviously realised a bit more as she got older that I could get killed, which must have upset her a bit. I remember when I said I was going back to Everest after I finished all 14, she did get a bit upset about that, I think, when I think about it. Yeah. But she was usually relieved when I came back. I remember she got older in her teens and I had satellite phones. I would ring her and try and talk to her, and she'd talk to me as a teenager and that. And then when I would ring her up and, she'd want to talk to me, which was great. She can't often talk to teenage daughters, can you? And then I'd ring her up and say, "Right, I'm safe now. I've climbed the mountain," or "I haven't climbed it, but I'm on my way back." And then I'd ring her again and say, "I can't actually talk at the moment. I'm just going out with so-and-so. I'm doing this or that." But once she knew I was safe, she wasn't bothered about talking to me, I suppose. But that's just human nature. It's quite ironic, really, funny. But so anyway, I'll hopefully be seeing her soon. Not seen her for a few weeks now, but be catching her soon. And obviously, she's moved on and got children of her own now, so I've got grandchildren.
And there's some lovely photos at the end of the book of you with your grandchildren in Nepal. I think, yeah, those are lovely. You mentioned Everest there and going back to climbing Everest. Are there others that you've wanted to go back to, or for many of them kind of put them to bed?
Yeah, I always say nothing would make me go back to any of those 8,000ers because they're all so dangerous. You can get killed. I'm lucky to be alive. I really am. And as I said before, most people that try and climb all 14 don't because they get killed. So I'm lucky to be alive. So nothing would make me go back to climb any of them again. No, I'm only joking. I always say that. I'm only joking. I've been back to. There is only really Everest and possibly Choyu. Those are the two. None of them are safe. None of them are easy. But I wouldn't go back to K2 for £1 million. No one's going to give me £1 million anyway. I mean, realistically, some person who wants help to climb it and thinks I can help them, very, very rich, they might give me 6 figures, 100 or 150,000. I'm just surmising, but it's not impossible. But that could be a realistic figure. You could say to somebody that maybe they can afford 200,000 if they're really, really rich. But I wouldn't go back for that. And I seriously wouldn't go back to K2 for £1,000,000. I did it for me, not for money. So why go back and get killed? I just couldn't face going back to K2. I could face Everest again, which is a bit, again, cognitive dissonance there, because obviously I could die on Everest, not only from avalanche, rockfall, the cold. I could die of cerebral pulmonary edema, acute mountain sickness. As I've got older, your blood gets thicker and more viscous at altitude, and there's more chance of you having a thrombosis or a heart attack as you get older, as I am now. You can't avoid that. Me getting older, anyone getting older, it'd be more dangerous me going to altitude as I've got older. But I'd probably still, as a push, would go back to Everest, something interesting or lucrative, whatever. I'm a mountain guide, so I'd try and guide somebody on Everest or Chihuahua, possibly, like I would guide them on Mont Blanc or the Matterhorn, or I guide people in Scotland or the lakes. Can't help it. I love being in the mountains, Hopefully, I'll be out on Friday somewhere, maybe plodging through some snow. I mean, there isn't much build-up of snow right yet, but there could be some snow to plodge through on the fell tops on Friday. So I might be doing that on Friday.
I mean, we're going to move shortly to some audience questions because we've got loads and it's brilliant. But I just wanted to ask you one final question from me about your photography and filming. Because, I mean, there's some absolutely beautiful photos in this book, and you've done various documentaries. Why was it important to you to do those photographs? And, you were working with film rather than digital cameras for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Why was that?
Yeah, I only went digital for Kanchenjunga, the last one, really. And in fact, I took ordinary film shots on Kanch as well. But on the summit, I had my first proper. I had a digital camera in the late 90s, but I think they were only 1 megapixel then, so that put me off. I mean, a cell phone has more megapixels than that now. So yeah, I've been a photographer since I was 11. I had my first camera then, and I started processing my own black and white when I was in the camera club at the Talent Grammar School. So I've been a photographer for many years. So I just can't help myself. I had to take pictures. Some of my friends, when I was climbing with them, usually on lower alpine style peaks, I would take at least 10 rolls, 36 exposure on a film, and they would moan about how heavy that was, extra weight, and slow you down taking pictures as well. But I've always taken photographs. So yeah, virtually every photo in the book has been scanned from transparency, color slide, which generally I used Fuji 100 ASA, which is Provia, sometimes Velvia, I sometimes use Kodak, Kodachrome, and sometimes Ektachrome as well. And in fact, there is even a bit of Agfachrome in there because I got sponsored by them once for a while as well. But most of it would be Fuji 100 rather than 50, which is the Velvia, Fuji Provia. And yeah, the great scans by fantastic drum scans that they've done on it. As I said, I'm digital now. And, I used to carry 100 rolls sometimes on an expedited base camp, which is a day pack full of film, a day pack of film, which would be x-rayed and cooked in the daytime in the heat and frozen at night. You had to look after it. You didn't know what you'd got till you got back and it was processed, which I usually use a local lab. All them labs have fallen off a cliff. Nobody uses film, hardly anybody anyway. And so in a memory card now that's the size of your thumbnail, I can get the equivalent of 100 rolls. 100 rolls is 3,600 shots. Well, I can get that on a memory card now, and you can X-ray it if you wish. It doesn't damage it, does it? But make sure you don't lose it when it's that big. So digital's great, actually. I'm a bit lazy. I do a lot of photography on my cell phone now, I must admit.
Well, they're so good though, aren't they, really, the quality?
Well, they are until you blow them up really big and you get what's called noisy now. We used to call it grainy, but it's called noisy now.
Noisy.
So you're best using your proper, camera and even doing RAW if you can be bothered, like, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Alan. We're going to move to some questions from the audience. And the first one, just because you mentioned sponsorships there, how did you actually get sponsorship for your climbs?
Tricky one, that. I didn't. It's very difficult to get sponsorship. It all goes into other stuff. I mean, a lot of the time it was just me working, doing talks, corporate talks, and investing a lot of my own money in it, really. But sometimes companies helped out. They might give a few thousand here and a few thousand there just because they wanted to help me out. Sometimes they were altruistic. They didn't want too much back, maybe just a photograph for the boardroom or something like that. So it's pretty difficult to get sponsored. It always is. Yeah, I remember once trying to get sponsorship off a food company, and for like ready meals and things like that. And then I was sort of saying how dangerous K2 was and so on and so forth, and they didn't sponsor me. And I'm like, what's going on there? Then I found out it was, well, you didn't sell it very well. They said you might get killed, so what's the point in sponsoring it? I said, well, people sponsor motor racing and they might get killed and whatever. And then someone else rung them up and said, you do realise that this guy's going to try the hardest mountain in the world. I think you should give him the camping food. And in the end, they sponsored me, and luckily I didn't get killed either.
Oh, brilliant. Another question. Did you use supplementary oxygen on your ascents?
Supplementary, that's the proper way to describe it, rather than the Americans call it supplemental. I did on Everest, yeah, because it was paid for by ITN. There was loads of it, and I thought I'll give it a go then. And so I like to try all the sort of things, and I have to say it did help. I think it keeps you warmer, and I think it did help, but there's a lot of extra weight, and I carried all 3 bottles myself. So I carried 3 bottles, stashed one on the way up so I could get it on the way down. But generally, I wouldn't have used it if the previous time I tried Everest, I was going to do it without a bottle of oxygen. Never used it on K2. So I don't feel I need to go back to Everest and do it without oxygen. Obviously, if I haven't done it without, you can't say I haven't, but I don't think it bothers me particularly. K2 was more important anyway. And bottled oxygen, you could almost say, isn't it a drug? And a lot of people that don't use bottled oxygen might use a drug and not tell anyone, whether it be dexamethasone, like a speed thing, or whether it be acetazolamide or anything, So I'm quite happy about using it on Everest. I carried it myself anyway.
A next question from David. With your daughter Fiona and then also your grandchildren, have you encouraged them to join you on the hills and get out and about?
Yes and no. I took Fiona out a few times when she was younger. And then she spent a lot of time with her mum as well. And I remember taking her once when she was about 4 or 5 up Pinnacle Ridge, a scramble in the Lake District. She did get a bit weepy on the exposed bit. She was a bit scared, but I put her under my arm like that, climbed with one arm, and the other arm was holding her. Never forget that. But I had a lot of, I still had a lot in the bank, a lot in reserve, even just climbing with one arm to get her up it. But she had a great day out then. There was a friend with his 2 kids as well. So I've taken her out a few times, and I've taken my grandchildren out a little bit as well, but I wouldn't encourage them to go and do the 8,000s. I wouldn't encourage anyone to go and do them.
Yeah. Would you have any advice for someone setting out to do all 14?
Don't do it. You're going to die. I don't know. It's a tricky thing. I mean, Nim's just did it last year, and he did all 14 in a year or 7 months. Amazing. I mean, if you want to do it, do it. But they will take a lot of time and a lot of effort. You could end up getting frostbite. But it's a great challenge to go for. I mean, things have changed a bit. You can get to them more easily, and there's less anxiety about them. People know about them. There are new routes to do on them. I mean, I did new routes on quite a lot of them. Sometimes the new route might just be a 2,000-foot variation. Well, that would be a mega route in Scotland, even in the Alps, So a lot of people think I just repeated routes that were on them, but not always. I did quite a lot of new routes. In fact, I did the first British ascent of Manaslu, and I did 2 new routes on Shishapangma. I did Shishapangma twice. The second time I didn't go to the main summits. I'd done it once before, so I thought, why bother? So I've got 2 first ascents on Shishapangma, first British ascent of Manaslu, did a variation on Broad Peak. I mean, a lot of them I did quite unclimbed lines on them. But anyway, the stacks of new routes to be done on the 8,000s if people want them. But it's worth going to try one if you want to test yourself. Not cheap though, and dangerous.
Yeah, I think what really comes across in your book as well is how much you're inspired by other great mountaineers. And I wanted to ask, who were your heroes when you were growing up? Who were your mountaineering heroes?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, there was John Willans and Joe Brown. Joe Brown really was the, and a lot of people forget Joe was a great mountaineer. He made the first ascent of Kanchenjunga in 1955 with George Band, and then the next day there was Tony Strether and Norman Hardy. But Joe then concentrated more on rock climbing, I must admit. But there was a lot of the, when I was very young, there was a lot of the German and Italian mountaineers that impressed me as well. People like Walter Benatti, who should have done the first ascent possibly of K2, but a couple of other Italians did, but that's another story. And then there was Cassin as well, Riccardo Cassin, another gnarly Italian. And then there was the Germans as well, like Andel Heckmeyer and Kasparek and Borg and Harrer, who did the first ascent of the North Face the Eiger in 38, and then some people them Nazis, but I think unfortunately a lot of people in the Second World War got sucked into that, so we won't go down that avenue. But there was a lot of gnarly, hard climbers around just before the Second World War and just after, and a lot of them were Europeans. And then you had your people like Joe Brown who came in as well and sort of climbed as well as them in the Alps, to be frank.
And then, I mean, so many of these people, I think, you climbed with so many people as well that you really respected and really got to know. We've got a question from Carol. How did you cope with the loss of your friends and colleagues, especially Alison Hargreaves on K2?
Yeah. There's sadly sometimes friends died while you're on an expedition. Sometimes they died on a separate expedition. Sadly, Alison and I went out together on K2 in '95 and climbed together for the first 10 days, a couple of weeks, and then she decided to climb with an American, and I climbed with an American. And my climbing partner dropped back, and I got to the top alone, as I say, solo. Sadly, Alison got killed. A couple of weeks later. That was pretty upsetting. I was back in Britain by then. I thought I should maybe stay there, but I climbed the mountain, so I did the last sort of interview film with her, and then I said, "This is good luck and take care." And I came back to Britain, and it did hit me hard. I got invited on I climbed it in July. She was killed in early August. I got invited by some French climbers to go to Kanchenjunga later that year and a couple of other expeditions. I just couldn't go on another climb that year. I couldn't go away to the Himalaya again, even though I had some invites and free expeditions. And ironically, my two French friends that invited me to go to Kanch in the autumn of '95, they both got killed. I sometimes wonder if I'd gone, would I have been killed, or would I have prevented them getting killed? You never know. So Alison got killed, two French friends killed, and a couple of other British friends got killed. One got killed rock climbing. So I lost 4 or 5 climbing friends in '95. It was a pretty tragic year, yeah. And then since then, every odd year, there's been somebody killed. I remember sometimes I'll just have to walk off and have a cry and think, this isn't worth it. This is tragic. Yeah, what can you do? Life can be pretty upsetting at times with all sorts of things that you lose.
I mean, thank you for sharing that with us, Alan. And I think your book is a really nice testament to a lot of people as well. And yeah, all those memories of the people that you climbed with, who are sadly no longer with us. We've got another question from Brian about something, close to home. Have you ever climbed the Coolin Ridge in winter?
No, I've climbed it in the summer, and I aspire to climb it in the summer. When I started rock climbing, so I could do things like the Coolin Ridge. So I didn't try and be a gnarly rock climber at first because of the gnarly things like the Coolin Ridge and difficult Mun roads. That's why I took rock climbing. I didn't do the Coolin Ridge till the late '70s when there was some sort of fuel crisis on. It was bizarre. So I remember having to drive a car up from the northeast England full of petrol cans so we could get there. Then when we got there was loads of fuel on Sky because they were giving people the percentages they had the previous year, and obviously no one was on Sky. And I've always wanted to do it in winter, but I haven't. No, perhaps I'll have a go this winter if they'll let Nicola Sturgeon will let me up there, and probably not though, will she? Well, I suppose if I'm working, I can go. I am a mountain guide, so I'll have to go on continuous person development to climb it, won't I?
Well, yeah, I think you'll have to. Yeah. A kind of follow-up question as well. Outside of the Himalaya, what is the toughest peak that you've climbed?
Oh, well, I mean, the Himalaya are big, and yes, they're tough. Lower, in the Alps, you've not got the extreme altitude to cope with, but you've got more technical difficulty. I mean, the North Face, the Eiger, is difficult. It's insane. But there are other mountains in the Alps I've done that are more technically difficult. The North Face, the Duats. You can go down to some really hard pure rock climb, or a snow and ice climb on the North Face of Ben Nevis or whatever. I mean, one of the most fabulous routes I've ever done, I've done it twice, is the Rhine Face Direct on Ben Nevis, which is an ice route, So one but to say, really. Yeah, I'll just.
That's good.
Everyone thinks that's gnarly. It is really.
And a question from Helen: have you suffered any long-standing illness as a result of all this extreme mountaineering, or any long-term effects?
Oh, I don't know. Probably got brain damage or lack of oxygen. No, I don't know really. Maybe I'm half a cabbage. I don't know. A lot of it's funny. It's rather salutary. A lot of high altitude mountaineers do seem to live a long time. They don't catch anything else, but it could have damaged my brain. It's lack of oxygen. It does affect you. I remember doing some tests once. One of them was a basic test like that, where if you can see, you just have to tap your finger twice like that, from your hand to your wrist, your hand to your wrist. And we did that before we went on an expedition. I think it was with some research in Birmingham Hospital or somewhere. We did that before we went, counted how many times we could do that in a minute. And then someone at base camp, when you're only at 5,500 meters at base camp, did that, see how many you could do in a minute. Apparently we were doing less, not that we realised. And then we got back to Briton and went and had a test at Birmingham, a week later, and did that. And we were still doing it less in a minute than we did before we left. So it does affect you, the lack of oxygen, but I think you get it back. The brain's pretty big and resilient, isn't it? Hope it has, anyway.
I suppose you haven't been at high altitude for a while, have you? Not kind of prolonged periods, so.
Well, I have. I've been at high altitude more than most people. I'd say possibly more than most Brits, I would think, the amount of times I've been to high altitude. 27 attempts on the 8,000ers. And then, I've done about 60 expeds all told to high altitude. If you include 6,000ers and 7,000ers, I've probably had about 60 expeditions.
Sorry, I meant like recently.
Not that much recently. No, nobody's been anywhere recently. We've been stuck in a plague, haven't we? Some sort of plague going on, I believe.
Yeah. We've got a question that I was also thinking about when I was going through your book. What's the plastic bag on page 116 of your book on the Lhotse South face?
Plastic bag?
So that your plastic
or do you mean
bag
a carrier bag?
Your carrier bag, sorry, is a key piece of mountaineering equipment.
Yeah, it's probably a blatant advert for LD Mountain Centre in Newcastle upon Tyne by the looks of it. Is that what it says on the bag?
I can't remember, actually. I can't remember the exact
I can have a look. I've got a book here. It sounds like that, actually. Yeah, just something daft like, why have a rucksack when you've got a carrier bag,
That's
it was
brilliant.
Probably some sort of sponsory thing as well at the time. Yeah. A laugh, so it's probably that shot if I think, yeah. I mean, I'll quite often take things and hold them up like that for a sponsor, but the book's not draped with sponsors' logos like that, but I would do that for a sponsor with a logo maybe, and then they can have it in their boardroom or the house or wherever they want, and I would use that in my talks. I would put a shot up of me holding a sponsor thing like that in my talks. I mean, I usually have one of, say, WaterAid or some charity as well as a sponsor, Hope I'm looking into the camera there, not looking dodgy.
Another question.
The camera.
We've got a question about from Sean. Having visited Nepal to walk the Annapurna circuit, the road went in, and then 12 years ago to climb Island Peak. How important do you think tourist holidays are for helping the local economy?
Oh yeah, they're very important. I mean, that's what I always say about people who even make comments about restricting the numbers to Everest. I mean, Everest is a huge mountain, so you see that queue of 200 people, and that's just in one day. As I say, the day before and the day after, there'll be nobody in Everest. Normally, there's nobody on Everest. This isn't trekking, I've digressed. There's normally nobody at Everest from the end of May till the following April. It's empty, but then there's a lot of tourists, a lot of trekkers go to Everest Base Camp or Annapurna, as forgotten the name, as this girl said, woman said.
Sean, yeah.
Sean, is it? Yeah. I presume it's a woman. And I mean, it is there. That's all they've got. They haven't got an oil well. Not that anyone should have one nowadays, we say, have they? But they haven't got a gold mine. All Nepal has really is tourism. And prior to that, and it still is mostly a subsistence economy where people grow food and eat it and barter with food and so on and so forth. One of the poorest countries in the world. So they make a lot out of tourism. If you go to the areas where there is a lot of tourism, like the Khumbu area of Everest, the Sherpa people that live in that area, that's where the Sherpa people are from. Other people in Nepal might be Gurung, Nuars, Rise, or Tamangs, and everyone calls them all Sherpas, but they're not. The Sherpa people are in that Khumbu region of Everest, and they're quite wealthy because of the tourism. It's quite a developed region, with lodges. Some people slag it off and say, "Oh, it's too commercialised," and this, that, other. Well, go to Switzerland. In the 19th century, it was pretty basic, full of peasants, and now it's pretty developed, isn't it? You go to Zermatt, and you can hardly afford to go there. It's that expensive in Zermatt and developed and full of ski lifts and so on and so forth. So who are we to dictate to Nepal? It's up to them. I don't think it's many tourists. There's not many there at the moment. Must be having a hard time, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And I mean,
Lovely people, the
speaking of,
Nepalese as well, I should say, by the way. Nepal is pretty safe. There's not really been any trouble there with, people getting captured or kidnapped. Very rarely has that happened. You don't get robbed particularly. It's a really safe country as far as countries go, and lovely people. I mean, it's nearly as nice as Yorkshire, Nepal, or Cumbria.
nearly as nice.
Yeah. Well, how could it be as nice as Cumbria or Yorkshire? No, it's great. And they're
And
lovely people. I've got some great Nepalese friends. They're great people.
this is maybe a question for you as a mountain guide and as a mountain enthusiast. This is from Tom. I did the tour of Mont Blanc this summer and have been fell walking in the lakes for years. I'm looking for a first big summit in the Alps. What's a good place to start?
It's big.
Off
Well,
the
it
top of your
depends.
head.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could just go for Mont Blanc and employ a guide and go that, I guess. Yeah, there's Monte Rosa as well. I'm having a silly moment. I'm trying to think of the one that's on the Italian border that a lot of people go to that's a little bit easier. And I can't remember his name now. I must be spaced out. Sorry about that. Yeah, but there's plenty of big summits. It depends whether you want to do a climbing one, as in, get your crampons on or start rock climbing, or whether you just want to go up a Via Ferrata Klettersteig, you could just go up the highest mountain in Germany, which you go up in a cable car, You don't want to do that. You want to go up a Klettersteig or a Via Ferrata. Mont Blanc isn't that. It's hard because it's high. You could do that with a mountain guide, although it's a bit popular. There might be queues there.
Oh well, hopefully that'll help
Ask
Tom.
one of the, am I allowed to give a plug for trekking companies? But ask some of the reputable British trekking companies. One based in Sheffield. The Sheffield one's good. Jagged low.
I think we're going to kind of wrap up soon. I'm sorry to everyone for the technical issues at the beginning, but if we run a few minutes over just to get through a couple more questions. From Leslie, have you still got your expedition suits that you wore, your Hinkes suits?
Yeah, well, I would wear like a down suit, like most people wear, which is like wearing a big sleeping bag. But over the top of that, I would always have a windproof suit, usually made out of something like untipped Gore-Tex, really. And that was what I sort of invented, really, a Hink suit. It was just a waterproof suit to put over everything else. It was just a big baggy suit, and it just acted like just an extra protection and a bivy bag. Yeah, so I've still got some of them. Still got one that's probably being used, I think, in it to go okay to go anywhere else. But I've still got some of them. I have to give them to the Mountain Heritage Trust at the Catherine Field Study Centre, I think.
And what are you up to at the moment? I know that COVID and lockdown has changed people's plans this year, but yeah, what sort of things are you up to at the moment?
Lurking. That's what we do in the north. We lurk. I'm just lurking like everybody else. Lurking. Going to the hills and things. Going out on my bike quite often. If I'm not in the hills, I'll do a short bike ride, which is a sort of serviced by a friend in Keswick, which was nice. So it's a bit better as my old bike because it's a trusty old Scott bike I've had for more than 20 years. So that's kept me sane. Going out quite often on my bike, even if I just go out for an hour and a half or a couple of hours. But I'm going in the hills as much as I can as well. And luckily, there's not really anything to stop you going in the hills now, thankfully. First lockdown, it was a little bit tricky, and actually lived in the hills, and even then they were saying you shouldn't really go in the hills. And anyway, I think it's a bit more free to go in the hills now. So I'm going in the hills quite a lot. So I'm hoping to get out on Friday. Got a few other things I've got to tweak and lurk with tomorrow. Probably in a bit of mindfulness, believe it or not, getting into all that as well.
And do you have any?
But you've got trying to keep sane, but yeah, things have changed a bit, shall we say? And I think a lot of people have had change, but yeah, I've had a bit of change.
And I mean, do you have any big plans for when you can get out and about again, or is it just a case of, or kind of abroad, or is it just a case of enjoying the mountains wherever they are?
No, just about enjoying them wherever you are. Yeah, try hopefully get out a bit of rock climbing in Spain when it's a bit damp here and things like that. Yeah, I don't think things are going to change. I mean, I've heard rumours there's a few people out trekking in Nepal at the moment, but not there. I don't know, but I believe there is. I've heard rumours there is, but there's not many people in many places. So we just got to do what we can. But I love the British Hills, so I don't have a problem just climbing and walking in Cumbria and northern England, not Yorkshire, and hopefully get up to Scotland if that woman will let me get up there, not block the border or whatever. And as I said, I can go working anyway. Apparently, you're allowed to go anywhere if you're working. So that's lucky for me. I'm a mountain guy. I'm working. Maybe you can go and fix things. If you're not a mountain guide, I don't know how you'll get in the hills. You have to think of some other way to work in them, won't you? It's great. I think going in the hills, I don't think, if you're really careful, should spread the disease anyway. If you keep 2 meters apart and you're not licking each other at all, you should be okay, shouldn't you?
I had one final question. You write about, I'm sure I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Kurt Diemberger, that the mountains are in his soul. Do you think they're in yours?
Yeah, I think they are really. Yeah. I've got to get my fix in the hills for sure. Yeah. As I say, I think there were, as a little boy, it was up where I always wanted to be. Yeah, I just have to be in the fells really, and I don't need to be in big fells. Little fells are okay, and there's some lovely little fells from Rosebery Topping to Dufton Pike to Castle Crag. You don't have to go up a big mountain. You can do a mini mountain, which is what I would have thought there were when I was a kid looking at Rosebery Topping. I thought that was a mountain to me. I bricks of people on top of it. Those of you that don't know Rosebery Topping, well, you just Google it these days, can't you? But it's a mini mountain in North Yorkshire, not far from Middlesbrough, a lovely place. And so I just like doing ones like that. As I say, it could be Arnington Crag or Castle Crag or Dufton Pike, some mini mountain. They're all in the north, but there are others like Stack Polly, which is a mini mountain. It's not even a Munro. So I just love being out really, and in the hills. But big mountains are great, and that could be Anchellac rather than Stack Polly or Sullivan. Well, Sullivan's almost a mini mountain. It's only 2,000 foot, but it feels like a big mountain of Sullivan. But yeah, you'll find me in the hills. That's where I'll be. Hills.
Oh, Alan, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for sharing all of your stories and all your memories. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. And I hope our audience have enjoyed it as well.
Great. Hope the lighting was all right.
Yeah, yeah, it's all good. Yeah. Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone. I should say as well. Try and enjoy yourselves. I know it's difficult, but hang on in there, folks. It's hang on in.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Thanks to our audience as well. I'm sorry about the technical issues at the beginning. We did do a sound check earlier, but things just didn't seem to go right when we joined earlier. But yeah, thank you so much. That brings us to the end of our December Cicerone live event. Thank you for joining us and for all of your brilliant questions. We tried to get through as many as we could. If you did miss any of it, the recording will be on the Cicerone Facebook page, YouTube, and the Cicerone website. So you can find it there and send it to anyone who might have missed it. And yeah, we'll also put highlights of the event in our next episode of the Cicerone podcast, which you can find on the website as well or on your podcast app. And you can also find all the recordings of our previous events on the Cicerone website, as well as plenty of articles and all of our books. And yeah, if you'd like a copy of Alan's brilliant book, which I think he's going to hold now. There it is. Yeah,
we should do another one of these after Christmas, and then I can tell you what I've been up to throughout December and January. We can have a vote. Anyone wants me to do another talk after Christmas? Or in January? So
yeah, remember to use that discount Everest 25 at the checkout on the Cicerone website for 25% off. So yeah, thank you so much, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.
It's 1.5 kilos, so you can train with it.
Thank you so much, Alan. We'll see you soon.
Bye.